Happy October, everybody, and welcome to week 1 of NowThis Nerd's monstrous month of Halloween horror.
I'm glad you'll be able to watch it.
Here at Nerd, we're clearly big fans of slasher cinema, and after nearly 40 episodes of How to Kill, I think we got a pretty good grip on the gory greatness of the genre. But what defines a slasher movie, and where do they come from? How did they dominate an entire decade, and why did slashers fall out of fashion for a few years, only to rise from their graves stronger than ever? I'm Moose, and this is the true story of slasher cinema. Now, there's no set definition for what separates slashers as a subgenre, but they tend to involve a serial killer terrorizing a middle-class community, picking off unsuspecting victims one by one until they are defeated by a sole, usually female survivor, the quote-unquote final girl. Now, there's obviously a lot of wiggle room within that spectrum and a lot of different stories you can tell, which is why slasher movies can be about everything from homicidal ice cream men to living urban legends made out of bees.
Beads?
The formula is so perfect, it's practically timeless, so let's see how it formed with a look at the slasher's ancestors. Blood and guts have always been a box office draw, all the way back to ancient Rome, where they packed the Colosseum for gruesome gladiator battles and horrific halftime shows where hundreds of helpless victims were murdered en masse just for the fun of it. As we move through the millennia, society developed substitutes for actual slaughter that nonetheless satiated our deeply ingrained bloodlust and played out on the theater stage. Violent plays were all the rage throughout the centuries. Even Billy Shakes got in on the action with grisly classics like Titus Andronicus.
Hark, villains. I shall grind your bones to dust.
But you'd be hard-pressed to consider them horror. The genre was finding its feet in literary fiction, but the themes tended more towards the supernatural, stories of ghosts and monsters and vampires that were spooky but not exactly relatable. Horror needed a human element, and the grand guignol gave it to us, along with buckets and buckets of blood. Le Théâtre du Grand Guignol opened in Paris in 1897 and quickly established itself as the home for horror. They specialized in naturalistic nightmares that reflected society at large. The scares didn't come from sterile ghosts, but the danger that lurked in the deranged heart of every human, our basest and most brutal instincts laid bare in a Paris playhouse. Grand Guignol's gore paved the way for horror cinema, pioneering special effects staples like bursting blood bags and gimmick knives.
Ah! God damn it, Shirley, why do you always have to be such an asshole?
Beg your pardon, I'm not an asshole. I'm an actor.
Early horror films drew a ton of inspiration from Grand Guignol, and even though Hollywood instituted the Hays Code in 1930, severely limiting how much sex and violence can be depicted on screen, you can see the early stages of slashers take shape in movies like 1932's 13 Women, where members of a sorority are picked off one by a mysterious killer. Or The Spiral Staircase, where a serial murderer stalks a mute woman. Throughout the decades, the censorship was slowly chipped away, setting the stage for the first slashers. Alfred Hitchcock's classic Psycho shocked the world when it debuted in 1960. It showed an unmarried couple sleeping in the same bed. It dared to depict a flushing toilet, a first in cinematic history. And more importantly, it introduced us to a sympathetic protagonist played by a famous actor and then killed her off in a legendary 3-minute symphony of shower stabbing. Psycho forced audiences to confront how vulnerable they really were and how death can come from the most unlikely source. Psycho's violence, intensity, and shocking twist caused a ton of controversy when it came out. And while it no doubt played a massive role in forming the slasher film, a more obscure movie from the same year may have had an even bigger influence. Michael Powers' masterpiece, Peeping Tom, featured a voyeuristic killer who filmed his victims' death throes with a camera, leading to the first-person POV shots that have become a hallmark of the genre. Psycho, Peeping Tom, and similar cerebral thrillers helped strip the Hays Code of its power, but there was still one important X factor missing from the mix: the sauce that makes a slasher film so satisfying: the splatter. Now, European filmmakers didn't have to deal with Hollywood's crushing conservatism, leading to the glamorously gruesome films of the Giallo movement, like Blood and Black Lace, which featured a killer with a blank mask for a face, hunting a group of gorgeous victims with their black-gloved bare hands. Back in America, times had changed, but the Hays Code was still holding the entire art form back. But smaller studios began to push the envelope with ultra-violent films.
A bit of the old ultra-violence.
1963's Blood Feast was an unrepentant exercise in excess, and along with other amazingly titled movies like The Wizard of Gore and 2000 Maniacs, it kickstarted the splatter genre. Splatter films gradually evolved into grindhouse, low-budget exploitation movies that appealed to our baser instincts with gratuitous nudity and blood by the boatload, best exemplified in 1974's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, it's debatable whether it's a slasher per se. Instead of a single antagonist, you got a whole family of crazy cannibals, and it kind of has more in common with hillbilly horror films like The Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes. But its gritty, low-budget approach to horror clearly influenced what was to come, as did Black Christmas. Before he directed A Christmas Story, Bob Clark had already left his mark on the horror genre with this holiday classic. Inspired by an urban legend, Black Christmas depicts a sorority stalked by an unseen killer. And while it's clearly the closest thing to a slasher movie we've seen so far, it would take another 4 years for the genre to really take shape. And I do mean shape, because in 1978, John Carpenter's Halloween ushered us into the Golden Age. So many films came before Halloween that it's hard to call it the first slasher, but it was the first to bring everything together into one perfect package. A small suburban town, a cast of promiscuous teens, a final girl whose purity prevents her doom, and of course, a heavy-breathing boogeyman with a big-ass butcher knife. Halloween wears its influences on its sleeve, paying homage to Psycho through character names like Dr. Loomis, and casting Jamie Lee Curtis, the daughter of the shower scene star Janet Leigh, as the patron saint of final girls Laurie Strode. But Halloween stands on its own as ground zero for the slasher craze. It cost a mere $300,000 to make and went on to gross well over $70 million. An economic equation that is a big part of the genre's appeal from a studio's standpoint. They're dirt cheap and they make a buttload of money.
Trade secrets.
Halloween's success spawned a string of imitators, most of which turned a profit but failed to start a successful franchise, save for one: Friday the 13th. Director Sean Cunningham saw just how much bank Michael Myers had brought in and quickly began work on a slasher of his own. Before the script was even completed, he took out a full-page ad in Variety boasting that Friday the 13th would be the most terrifying film ever made. Now, I don't know about all that. It'd take the franchise kind of a few tries to find its feet, not to mention its signature star, but Friday was a huge hit too, and it came at the perfect cultural moment. In 1980, Ronald Reagan had just entered office, ushering in a new era of conservative values and panicked pearl-clutching about sex and violence in cinema.
And the summer and fall of 1980 are the worst yet.
As a result, Friday caused a big fuss. Critic Gene Siskel even gave away the twist ending in his review just so people wouldn't go and see it. But all that controversy, that just led to cash, baby. And Friday's success allowed it to innovate another hallmark of the slasher genre, the first slasher sequel. The early 80s were saturated with so-so slashers, but as the box office returns began to shrink, studios turned to desperate gimmicks like 3D.
I have warned thee.
And began churning out even cheaper films direct to the brand new home video market instead. Still, there were plenty of bright spots amongst all the blandness and badness.
Freeze! Hold it right there. You make one more move towards that girl, I swear I'm gonna hang your head on my wall.
And by 1984, slashers had arguably reached their creative peak. Not only did that year see the best Jason movie, The Final Chapter, we were also introduced to the demonic Dream Master who would push the boundaries of the slasher genre and arguably bring about its doom. Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street changed the game in more ways than one. Freddy Krueger had a personality and a presence lacked by Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, and so many other silent hulking monsters. And his surreal dreamscapes raised the bar for creative kills. Unfortunately, he might have raised it a bit too much. Freddy's arrival heralded a new era of supernatural slashers like Chucky, Candyman, and Pinhead, all of whom required a higher caliber of special effects that cut into the cost-effective appeal of slasher movies. Don't get me wrong, slashers were still a cultural phenomenon. Just ask Will Smith and Jazzy Jeff.
I can't believe that there's a nightmare on my street.
Oh shit. It's so sick. But the genre was clearly on the decline, and by the early 90s, they were all but dead. Wes Craven's creation nearly killed slasher movies, but in 1996, he brought them back to life bigger than ever. The story of Scream and the postmodern slasher revival is sadly beyond the scope of this video, but next time, we'll take a look at how the decades of terrifying tropes that gave birth to the genre helped it evolve and thrive in a whole new millennium.
Happy Halloween!
Thanks for watching, everyone, and welcome to Halloween Horror Month here on NowThis Nerd. We've got so much cool stuff planned, new shows, returning shows, old friends, new friends, and really cool things happening on the community tab. So please subscribe, and if you're subscribed, hit the notification buttons because we've got all kinds of amazing stuff leading up to Halloween.